Hey YouTube land, Tokka and Rahzar doing another action figure review. Well, a double action figure review because this is a duo of characters from, well, these are the animated versions of them, but they're from, if you're old enough and remember the movie or have seen the movie, this is the characters that were based on the sequel to the hit movie of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and this is from Secret of the Ooze. Well, these particular ones are based on the characters from Secret of the Ooze, but these are actually their cartoon versions. And it is Tokka and Rahzar from. These are from the people from the Loyal Subjects, and this is part of their BST AXN line, and they do a whole bunch of Turtles goodness. So before I get on to the figures, I'm going to move them aside and bring in the boxes. So Rahzar's box, you have this fairly large box actually for these. Let me just move their collector card out of the way as well. The depth on these boxes are quite deep. They're actually nearly 3.5 inches in depth, so they are quite big and chunky. You have an image of Rahzar on the side of the box. You have an image of the prototype figure on the back of the box, and then it has a brief write-up for this guy saying this mutant grey wolf is created when Shredder unleashed mutagen at a zoo. When his best friend Tokka was captured by the mutant hunter Dirk Savage, he set out on a mission to save him and make Savage pay. So their origins is different to that of the movie, where in the movie they were basically stolen. I think they were stolen from the zoo, and it was the professor was charged with making mutants that could counter the turtles. So he developed the TCRI professor, which I can't remember his name, basically created them for Shredder as henchmen in a kind of replacement for Bebop and Rocksteady, who were never in the live action movies. They were basically the equivalent of Bebop and Rocksteady. Tokka's box is pretty much the same. You have an image of Tokka on the front. On the side, you have the Turtles logo on the top. And then you have a brief write-up as well, and you have the 31 points of articulation. Created by after the Shredder unleashed mutagen at the zoo, Tokka is an out-of-control alligator snapping turtle. After being captured by the mutant hunter Dirk Savage, he was rescued by his best friend Rahzar. So they're again slightly different origins to that of the cartoon or that of the movie. In fact, to say, yeah, it's the same thing that's on both of the collector cards, where you have an images. It's the same image that are on the side of the box. These are supposedly limited edition collector cards on the box, it says. But we'll get into it. So here they are in all their animated glory, which is quite nice. They do come with some accessories, most of which they are holding. So for scale wise, Tokka stands, I'm just trying to figure out which is the tallest part of him, because he does have those protruding spikes on the back, but I think it's his head. So he's about just around 5.5 inches, whereas Rahzar is a lot taller. He comes in on around near the 6-inch mark, maybe just a hair short of it, but he is quite a big, hefty creature. So I haven't done too many reviews of this line. I think I did a review for the Foot Soldiers, and I'm going to bring in the Shredder from this line. This is the animated Shredder based on the cartoon version of Shredder, the one voiced by Avery Brooks, aka Uncle Phil from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, if you're not familiar with that. Or the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, not the remake, which is actually a good remake. But there is the scaling of these two. They're a lot bigger and a lot heftier than the kind of standard turtles. Now, I don't have any of the standard turtles in this line. The only other figure I picked up, and I don't have them at hand, is the Casey Jones figure. A couple of the Foot Soldiers, I did pick up Slash, who I would imagine is around the same scale as the Turtles, the standard Turtles, and he's not much bigger than Shredder himself, so there is that kind of scaling on him. But these guys are really cool. So for Tokka and Rahzar's accessories in the form of their weapons, Tokka has this really cool knife with a bladed knuckle section on it. This knife is pretty much the same design as the Slash action figure. He had a very similar knife with that was all in purple plastic, and I think he also had a mace that was very similar to this as well. They usually kind of used a lot of swapping over parts for Slash and Tokka, as evident by his belt. The belt is literally a direct copy of the one that Slash wore on the action figure, not the one he wore in the cartoon series, but the action figure's belt looked more like this. Had the Foot Clan logo and had these squares on the front with the skull and crossbones on it, and had these turtle shells and pockets around it. Unfortunately, I don't have a actual original version Slash figure, but it is pretty much, he was kind of based on the same idea. In fact, I think his shell also kind of had a bit of crossover. The only difference was his head was different, and I think these upper spike parts were different, and obviously his hands didn't have the Shredder like double claw things that were wrapped onto them. So there was a lot of crossover between Tokka and Slash in between the cartoon, the figure, and the TV series. So there was a kind of mix and match. Whereas Rahzar here, on the other hand, was a kind of a complete new design. The interesting thing about these guys is they were both designed by the Jim Henson company for the movies, which is kind of why you have this kind of almost Muppets style heads for them. Even the original turtle suits were designed by the Jim Henson company, but these guys have a more comedic, well, in the movie they were a bit more, I suppose they still had the same kind of comedic look to them. They weren't as realistic as they could have been, but I've always loved the design for Tokka. He's one of my favorite kind of bad guy turtles. Him and Slash are basically my two favorite. But Rahzar here has a sewer lid shield. Again, kind of like a homage to, was it Bebop and Rocksteady? They both came with sewer lid shields. That's why they're he's kind of a nod to them. And this is an interesting weapon that he has. He has a human skull on a stick. Now, if you think about that, it's fairly dark and ominous. Like, where did he get this human skull? Did he like decapitate someone and just use their skull as a weapon, or did he steal it from like a graveyard or something? It's open to interpretation, I suppose. It is worth noting that the skull is actually larger than an average size human in this line. So like, this is Shredder's head compared to the skull, so it's a bit bigger. So maybe it's a some sort of Halloween decoration that he stole and uses as a weapon. But overall, his design is fairly similar to what he looked like in the movie, albeit he looks a bit more cartoony with the head sculpt and the way they did the eyes. I think the eyes on the original one was, the eyes on the original figure had red pupils, just like Tokka's, but they are quite articulated. And then for additional stuff, they actually have two additional hands. So you have kind of these outstretched hands for Rahzar, and you have a pointing and a outstretched hand for Tokka. The weapon grip hands are quite nice. They do hold their weapons reasonably enough. They were a little bit tough at the start to get their weapons into their hands, but they do fit. So before I go on to the articulation, I'm going to do a comparison time, because I do have some versions of the original toys. So here is mutating Tokka and his buddy counterpart, mutating Rahzar. So if they look a little chunky and big and bulky, it's because these guys were based on the mutating line, where you could transform them from their animal form, which is the snapping turtle, the crocodile snapping turtle, and the wolf, the grey wolf, into their mutated animal or non-animal forms, or their mutated forms. So there's a lot of opening parts, flipping parts, and various things. But you can see these are roughly how big the originals figures were as well. They didn't change up the scale too much on these for height. They would have been around the same height anyway. So you can see how tall the newer ones, or these newer lines, tower over them. It is interesting noting that like Tokka is kind of more, has a more kind of bent knee kind of thing. So if you were to kind of do that with the figure, I know I'm doing it off screen, but like if you're to kind of bend his knees a bit and kind of shrink him down a bit, he might get to around the same height, maybe a little tall, still a little taller, but he is like, they're both fairly tall figures. So moving them out of the way, and hopefully not knocking everything else down. So articulation wise on these guys is quite nice. Now you're going to get hindering with the upper shoulders for bending them out. They don't get much range of movement because of sculpt wise, both on Rahzar and Tokka. For Tokka, it's these shoulder spikes get in his way, and for Rahzar, it's his upper armor plate. You can rotate the arm all the way around. There's a bicep swivel. There's double jointed elbows, but you can just about get over 90-degree bend with both elbow using both joints. You have a wrist swivel, and depending on which wrist you have in, there is a hinge, which is quite tight on mine. Same with the other hand. They have the grip hands. Heads are on kind of a ball joint, so you get a good range of movement on that. There is a sort of diaphragm or upper diaphragm just behind this kind of soft shell piece, but it doesn't really do much, especially for Tokka. You don't get too much, though his shell is kind of stuck onto him, so you don't get much in the waist movement. You do have a thigh swivel, which is quite nicely hidden. You have a hinge, you got double jointed knees, and you got rocker ankles, but no peg holes on the bottom of the feet. So I'm just getting to stand in a more neutral pose. We'll go on to Rahzar. Oh, and one other part I nearly forgot, which is really cool about these guys, is they have articulating jaws, which is quite nice. So you can recreate that thing in the movie where they go, "Mama!" Yeah, when Shredder brings them out for the first time, he realizes they're not as intelligent as the turtles are. Same with Rahzar. He has that articulating jaw, so depending on how high up you have the head, you'll get more range of movement. If the head is down a bit, you won't get any movement on it, but the head is on a ball joint, you can get some good range of movement on that. I think this is the first time that Rahzar has had really an articulating jaw, because the NECA version of Tokka does have an articulating jaw, but I don't think the NECA version of Rahzar does. I think they left it just a solid piece, kind of like similar how the original figures were. But I think this is first instance where the figure for Rahzar has that articulating jaw. Again, you actually have butterfly joints on the shoulders as well, and you have that rotating all the way around. As I said, they get out that much, but it gets hindered because of this upper shoulder armor. You get a little bit better 90-degree bend on his elbow, more than Tokka does. Again, wrist swivel, and the hinge is on the wrist as well. So there is that. You have upper waist on this guy. You get a little bit of movement out of it, not much. There is a lower waist, which is really tight on mine, so I don't want to overstretch it in case I snap something. But there is a supposedly lower waist articulation. There is hinge, can do splits that much. Can rotate the legs, can kick forward that much, can kick back a small bit. Double jointed knees. Doesn't get as much as a bend as Tokka does. So I suppose the trade-off is Tokka's elbows don't bend as much, and Rahzar's bend way better. Rahzar's elbows bend way better, and Rahzar's knees aren't as articulated as Tokka's. He has really big feet, and he has those rocker ankles as well. So he has all the standard stuff. Now, there is one kind of QC issue on mine. You can just see it here on the upper shoulder swivel. or the biceps oval, it seems to be popped out, and I'm not sure if it's just because it got an issue with molding. It doesn't really affect it too much, but it just looks a little unsightly compared to the other side. You can see it's flush to the actual shoulder, whereas on this one it's a bit out. What I might be able to do is drill out a small bit of the plastic that's in there so it sits a bit better, but other than that, he is really cool. Sculpt wise, he's quite nicely done. He's wearing these kind of tighty green Speedos sort of thing, and he has this kind of ripped shirt, and he has that kind of, I think it's originally in the movie, I think it was like the front piece off a car as an armor plate, like an old 50s style car, which is kind of reminiscent to what I think he took it off like some kind of panel van, like a 50 style panel van or something along those lines, but he has it on a chain, he uses it as armor. Same with Tokka. Tokka has a lot of just like sculpted on work, and his shell is really nicely detailed as well, so he has a lot of really nice stuff going on. So I'm gonna wrap it up here, but as I said, the scale for this line is a good bit different to 4-inch. So this is kind of the average 3¼ inch, and this is kind of average 4-inch scale figure, so they're in a kind of scale all of their own. In fact, if I just grab tape measure for Shredder, I think he comes in around 5.5. Nope, just around the 5-inch. So kind of on scale for the original toy line, because they were kind of big figures, but it's not the same as a 3¼ inch or 4-inch scale figure line. So either way, they are really cool figures. You could get away with these guys because they're so big, being in a 3-inch or 3¼ inch or 4-inch scale figure line. They are mutants, so they could be bigger than an average human. You could get away with it if you just pick up those guys on their own. Again, they are cartoony colored. There is a variation set on these guys, which are based on the video game appearances of them, if I remember correctly. So they do look different in colors. I think Tokka is kind of a really dark bluish color, and Rahzar is a more tan color, I think he is. There is a difference. There is like an alternate variation set on these, but I was excited to get these two. I did pick up a few other figures from this line as well, which I will get around to doing a review of as well. And I should give a shout out to Uncanny Collectibles, who sold me this set as well. They seem to be getting in a lot of the Loyal Subject Turtles figures recently, so if you're still up on the website, I'll put a link in the description below. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video review for this action figure set, or well, these two characters. You can't really do review one without doing the other, because they are kind of an iconic duo. So all in all, I do love the sculpting, the figure detail, and the articulation on these guys, and I do think they are worth picking up if you're a fan of the Turtles in general. Even if you're a fan of just like Tokka as a character, he's a cool version of Tokka, and Rahzar is good as well. So all in all, they're pretty good. So again, I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you all had a good Christmas and everything was well for you, and hopefully I'll get maybe 1 or 2 videos in before the New Year's, and I might do a New Year's video as well. So hope you enjoyed this video, hope you have a good time, and I hope you give this a thumbs up, a like, comment, and subscribe. Cheers, guys.